Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. Sarah caught the tired, exchanged glances of the two Marys, Colin's teacher and the school principal, Mary Jenkins. It was as if they were silently agreeing. We'll have to put up with this simple mother a little longer. What can you expect from her? She had lost her composure so completely that she couldn't pull herself together. So far away? Surely there isn't a boarding school closer. I won't even be able to visit him every day after work. I just won't make the bus back. Sarah Jenkins, the principal, tried to speak softly, as if to a child. A boarding school doesn't involve daily visits from parents to children. You will pick Colin up on Saturdays and take him home for the weekend. And for holidays too. I will prepare the application for the educational allowance for you. You are a single mother with a low income. You are entitled to benefits. This is an excellent solution, first and foremost, for Colin. However much Sarah urged herself not to fall apart, her eyes filled with heavy moisture on their own. And soon those ridiculous tears streamed down her cheeks. The mascara probably ran, and she looked utterly pathetic. Mary Adams, Colin's teacher, kindly offered her a napkin from the school cafeteria and sat down on a chair nearby. "Sally, dear, let's talk informally, shall we, Mary Jenkins?" "Thank you. Yes, that will probably work better. For Colin, this is truly a chance. Don't you think that a boarding school is immediately about neglected children of alcoholics? That's nonsense. Sometimes life circumstances just turn out that way, and people have to choose boarding school education for their children. And there is no shame in that. This boarding school has a good reputation. These aren't just stories for a report. A close friend of my cousin works there as a cook. The staff sees everything from the inside. The atmosphere there is kind. Nothing terrible happens. There aren't and haven't been any fights. And the teaching staff is friendly. And the main thing is the excellent English. The teacher is strong and knows how to engage. And for Colin, such strong teachers are the most important thing. He is a very capable, extraordinary boy. I've been working here for 25 years, Sarah. I have the right to judge and compare. In our local school, he won't get such a quality education. Forgive me, Mary Jenkins. There simply aren't any subject specialists of that level to be found here. She nodded towards the principal, sighing dryly. Who of that level would come to us? Exactly. Mary Adams gestured towards the principal. Sarah, this is a fact of life. Think about Colin's interests. He will grow up and thank you for taking the opportunity to give him a different life. Language is needed everywhere now. With language, the earnings are completely different. Well, I see you've calmed down and agree with me. Forgive me. I was just overwhelmed. Sarah wiped her hot cheeks with the napkin, quickly crumpled it up, and threw it into the trash can under the table. I just can't imagine how I'll tell Colin about this yet. What if he thinks I want to get rid of him? He'll grow up and say, "She sent me away to make her life easier." And we've already thought about that, haven't we, Mary Jenkins? Mary Adams smiled, pleased with herself. I've already talked to Colin twice. There's nothing to worry about, Sarah. He's actually quite open to going to study in the city if he can come home on weekends. Everything new interests him. At his age, it's an adventure. Especially since, although he's calm and diligent, he's not faint-hearted and wants to achieve a lot in life. You're raising quite a young man, Sarah Jenkins. You'll be proud yet. It felt to Sarah as if that conversation had happened yesterday. And in 6 months, her son would be graduating. All the details would be announced at the pre-New Year parents' meeting. For a year and a half, she had been setting aside a little money from each paycheck for her son's event, to give him a pleasant surprise. And if it wasn't enough, her friend Nancy had promised to lend her some. It would be good to know in advance how much was needed, to figure out how much would be left for Colin's suit and shoes. And also, She probably needed to give something from herself, at least to the class teacher. "Nan, what do you think? Flowers, chocolates, maybe some brandy?" Sarah asked her more experienced friend. "Brandy? You're hopeless!" Nancy laughed, throwing her head back. "You're not going to see a doctor after being discharged. Don't even bother, it's like everywhere else. You'll hand in the money, and the parents' committee will order everything themselves. You don't need to bring anything separately. Better buy something for yourself to wear to the graduation." How many years has it been since you bought anything for yourself? Looking at you, you'd think they haven't paid salaries at your post office for years. Everything for your son. Everything for little Colin. That's good, of course, but in moderation, you can't completely neglect yourself. I'm almost 10 years older than you, Sal. And even I consider myself young and sometimes spoil myself. You're only 35, you're still a girl, but you've written yourself off as an old aunt. It seemed you could leave Nancy unfed all day if you gave her the opportunity to lecture someone on life. Usually, Sarah was at hand for this. But Nancy not only gave unsolicited advice, she also never refused to help if needed. But about spending on herself. It was easy for Nancy to talk. Her husband had a modest but stable job at the tractor station, and her grown daughter and son-in-law lived in a big city, didn't ask for help, sometimes even helped their parents with money themselves. It was useless to remind Nancy that when her Daisy went to the city to study at college, she also had to spend money. She didn't want her daughter to look poor. She didn't want to. Since 4th grade, almost 8 years now, her son had been studying at the city boarding school. Kind Mary Adams, who still taught primary school children in their Camishin school, had been right. In Colin's class, there were only 2 children from disadvantaged families, and one of them was Colin. The others studied at the boarding school for other reasons. Some were unwanted by their mother's new husband, even if he wasn't poor at all. Some had single or divorced mothers juggling 2 jobs or their own small business and were simply afraid that the child would grow up completely unsupervised. And there were so many stories. Everyone had their own life. It was easiest to judge without understanding. Some bought off their children with expensive gifts, didn't take them home every weekend, but gave them an expensive mobile phone or game console. Colin told her. Sarah didn't ask if he liked that kind of substitute. She was shy of awkward questions. As long as her son seemed happy to come home, that was good. She tried her hardest to make sure he didn't feel deprived. It wasn't his fault that she was an orphan through and through and was raising him alone. And Sarah tried. She bought simple toys at first. Then the game console her son mentioned. A player, a mobile phone, shoes, and clothes. She knew she was buying cheap things, but with her post office operator's salary, she still had to manage to buy something beyond the bare necessities. There was truly nothing left for herself, and Sarah tried not to notice. What was the point of thinking about it and walking around unhappy? A tear-stained, miserable face wouldn't bring in any more money anyway. Nancy read aloud an article from a fashion magazine. Negative emotions are detrimental to health. See? I always felt that, Nancy triumphed. My mother always told me, spit on everything, take care of your health. And now British scientists have confirmed it. British scientists everywhere. Sometimes they study such nonsense that everyone has known for ages without them, and they probably rake in big money for it. They rewrite an old truth in a new way and go to the Canaries on their fees. See? I even rhymed. But we won't be envious. We don't care about their earnings. Let's forget about negative emotions and be healthy. Sarah completely agreed that whining wouldn't add to her health, so she nicknamed her boots, which she had been wearing for 10 years, the Veterans, and tried to look at them without sadness. Not so long ago, Sarah used to come to the regional city before weekends and holidays and pick up her son from the boarding school to take him home. She loved those evenings when she and her son sat side by side on the bus. She would put her arm around his shoulders. They would chat about everything and nothing. And somewhere halfway, Colin would fall silent and fall asleep. And Sarah would listen to his quiet breathing. But for 3 years now, Colin had been getting home by himself. "8th grade, Mom. I'm perfectly capable of getting on a regular bus and getting to Camishin. And 1 ticket is cheaper than 2. You're always talking about saving money yourself." "Look at you, so sly. You found an excuse, clinging to the economy. You've become completely grown up." Sarah laughed, ruffling his hair. "Just say you're embarrassed to ride with your mom like a little kid." Of course, the boy had grown up. He wanted to feel like an adult. It made her a little sad. This was the time when he almost didn't need her anymore. And soon he wouldn't need her at all. "You should be happy," Nancy declared at her sad confession. "You've almost raised a boy. Soon he'll be earning money himself. And it will be much easier for you. You'll be able to breathe, rest, and afford something for yourself." Sarah understood that her friend was right, but for some reason, she couldn't feel happy. The parents' meeting at the boarding school was held a week before the New Year holidays. Colin stayed to finish his studies, and Sarah was going home to the village alone on the last evening bus. She was a little confused. The graduation would cost more than she had thought. In their Camishin, they collected much less money for school celebrations because most parents struggled to make ends meet. Only if someone's husband earned money working away from home were there funds. Or if someone kept livestock and traded meat. She had brought the sum she had saved for a rainy day over a year and a half from her paycheck. But now, no matter how she calculated, it would only be enough for Colin's suit and shoes. And she had nothing to wear to go see her son. Okay, maybe she would figure something out in 6 months. She could borrow a dress from someone, but shoes were more difficult. And anyway, all this was such nonsense. The main thing was that her Colin had become the winner of the District English Olympiad. And he was good with exact sciences. Only in chemistry and biology did he occasionally get average grades. He had no interest in those subjects. But the other teachers praised him highly. It was interesting. Who did he get that from? Sarah herself had been an average student, and Mike, Colin's father, hadn't shown much interest in studying. And there was no one with a solid education in either of their families. Colin would be the first. Though it was better not to think about it, so as not to jinx it. Sarah and her friend Nancy had a good plan. When Colin got into university, he could live in the city with Nancy's cousin. The aunt agreed to rent out a room for almost nothing, as long as the lodger helped her around the house, carrying groceries from the store and walking her dog in bad weather. Her own son lived in Moscow, and she was often ill and complained that it was hard for her without help. If only the aunt didn't change her mind and charge a high price. "Girl, wake up, your native Camishin." The bus conductor touched her shoulder. "Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Am I delaying the bus? Thank you. Goodbye." Sarah grabbed her bag and flew out of the bus, not even having time to properly wake up. "Good girl," the conductor said after her, who liked to discuss the passengers who appeared depending on her mood when there weren't many people on the bus. Her son is studying in the city, at the boarding school. She's so proud of him, a smart boy. She only thinks about him. Raising her son alone. Did you see that shabby jacket she wears? And her boots will tear soon. She's neat, takes care of herself, but you can't hide poverty. And she's pretty. If you dressed her up, your whole bus fleet would crane their necks looking at her. I'm telling you. Oh well. A week later, as the small staff of the Camishin post office was preparing to set a small table after work on the last day before the new year, Nancy rushed into the office. You could always tell if something had happened to her. She became serious and composed. Now even her round cheeks seemed to have slightly sunken. Her eyes were wide open, and confusion lurked in them. "Sal, hi. Put this jar of pickled tomatoes down. I just found out by chance. From Tony, he used to work as a driver at a roadside cafe on the highway. She's the cashier, she's the bartender, she's also the waitress. The cafe was respected by truckers and forest industry workers. He died in the big world. Mike. For some reason, he got out of a hot sauna drunk and jumped into an ice hole in freezing weather, and his heart couldn't take it. I didn't ask for details, and Tony probably doesn't know either. I had no idea that his friend Tony had kept in touch with Mike all these years. They called and wrote to each other. I only found out by chance just now. I asked why Moose looked so gloomy, and he said, yesterday they were commemorating his friend Tony. That's the story. No, he had one good drink, and he's gone. So young. Who would have thought he had a weak heart? Sarah, for some reason, picked up the 3-liter jar of tomatoes again and quietly called out to her boss. Irene Peterson, I won't be able to stay for the office party. Really, I can't. Please excuse me and the girls. What happened, Sally? She found out Colin's father died, Nancy answered for her friend. Oh, Irene Peterson exhaled. She wanted to add something else, but just waved her hand and suddenly suggested, stay, both of you girls. We can commemorate him together. What will you do sitting alone, remembering, dwelling on it? We're all friends here. If you need to talk, we'll always listen. You really should stay, Sarah. Nancy supported the idea. I can't. My husband is waiting for me home earlier. He's worried he won't make the aspic properly without me. And we have guests for New Year's. I wouldn't care about this aspic when something like this happens. But then he'll grumble for 2 weeks that I'm chatting with friends and the household is neglected. So thank you, Irene Peterson. Please keep an eye on things. And tomorrow, Colin is arriving, and my mood will immediately lift. That's life. What can you do? It goes on. In the morning, Sarah scolded herself for going to Nancy's after the gathering at the post office instead of going home. She wasn't used to drinking. She drank very rarely. A glass of champagne on New Year's, or a shot of sweet liqueur on someone's birthday. And she didn't know her limit at all. And here, all evening, she and Nancy reminisced about the past, their youth, Sarah's love story with Mike. And Nancy's husband Al, hearing the reason, brought a bottle of cherry liqueur. He made the liqueurs himself, and they were cunning ones. Tasty, easy to drink like juice. But if you had too much, your legs would get tangled even with a clear head. Al commemorated Mike with the friends with one shot and quietly left, not bothering them anymore. And they stayed up past midnight. Only then did she understand. All these years, she had kept her word to herself, not to talk or even think about Mike. But today she could. She even had to. Especially since she trusted Nancy and wasn't at all shy about her memories in front of her. Mike appeared in their class in the very last school year. He arrived with his father, who had decided to return to the village after many years of working all over the country. Mike's father, Max, was a drilling foreman, and he had traveled with various expeditions, with geologists and surveyors, everywhere. The commission women discussed the strange story for almost a month. Mike's mother had left for another man, simply ran away, leaving her son with his father. When fathers abandon children, nobody is surprised by that, but it's unbelievable when a mother can do that. Such was the unanimous verdict of the local gossips. What kind of love happened to her? The husband hardly drank, was calm, handy, even saved some money. Not a lot, but enough to renovate the old father's house and buy new furniture. And there's a car, even if it's old. In short, quite a catch. He won't be alone for long. Especially since his son is almost a grown man, soon off to the army. He'll stay here, in the village. There's nothing for young people to catch here now. As soon as Sarah saw Mike, she immediately knew that there would be something special between them. She hadn't dated anyone yet, hadn't even thought about boys. She was a child. But here she understood, and that was it. Most boys in their teens were awkward, gangly, but he was a well-built young man. He walked into the classroom behind the principal and looked up. His very first glance fell on Sarah, and for a few moments, They stared at each other without looking away. Sarah understood that he liked her. There was no need to say anything. Sarah's mother, Lucy, had studied in the district center and married a newcomer from the North Caucasus there. In the first years, when the young couple rented housing, they lived well, and their daughter Sarah was born. And then they went to her husband's homeland, where his behavior among his own people changed almost beyond recognition. Her mother used to say, "He was terribly jealous and started acting like some sort of tough guy," saying things like, "Be quiet, woman, I'm in charge." And his mother was there. A woman is supposed to honor and endure her mother-in-law's nagging until she becomes a mother-in-law herself. Here, at least relatives would stand up for you if something happened. But I was a stranger. I had no one. I endured a little. It was scary to divorce with a small child, but I still decided and left with you for home. If it had been a son, maybe my husband wouldn't have given him up. He would have fought for custody, but he let you go easily. Returning home, her mother Lucy got a job at the post office. Sarah remembered this post office as long as she remembered herself. She was constantly hanging around her mother's work after school. She truly knew how everything was arranged there, as if it were her own home. After her mother's death, Sarah was given her mother's job, and everyone took it for granted. Who else would they hire? Perhaps the post office was Sarah's destiny. But back then, she was sure. Her destiny was Mike. Her mother had instilled in Sarah that a girl should seem a little indifferent, sometimes act capricious, not be the first to make up after a quarrel. Let the boy think that he wasn't as important to her as she was to him. Let him win her over. And all this was in vain. Her mother's words were carried away by the wind past her daughter's ears. Sarah was completely unable and unwilling to hide how much she loved Mike. He liked it, and he got used to it. They didn't even quarrel once. Sarah easily gave way. Everything seemed trivial compared to the happiness of being near him. The first school year flew by like a whirlwind, and Mike left for the district center to study auto mechanics. And Sarah rode to him every weekend, when he himself couldn't or didn't want to come to the village. More often than not, he didn't want to. Mike's father misses him very much. You should visit him. You haven't been home for 2 months. He started plying me with drinks after every trip I made to see you. I even promised him I would come myself and tell him your news. Last time he asked if you were offended by something. I think he was hinting that you were jealous of him with Aunt Teresa. Tell him I'm an adult. I have my own things going on here. Let him live with his Teresa. I'm completely fine with it. He doesn't have to live alone. I'm not planning to live in the village after studying in the army. Sarah thought it went without saying. When he talked about himself, he was talking about her too. They were always together, and it would always be that way. Not once did she become wary. Was there a place for her in Mike's future plans? Mike's father, Uncle Max, was a little bit to be pitied. Even though he had found a companion, a son was a son. Before the army, Mike finally came to his father in Kamyshin. He was seen off there. He had already worked in a car repair shop. He handled money confidently and independently. He brought Sarah a tight blue denim miniskirt and a white t-shirt with palms and a beach. She wore the gifts to Mike's send-off to the army. Kamyshin was not a small village, and half of Kamyshin came to see Mike off. Teresa, Max's partner, along with her friends, set tables in the garden. She worked as a cook and came up with many interesting dishes from the simplest products, so there would be enough for everyone. Mike's friend Gary came from the district center, who worked in the same auto repair shop, already an adult, about 25 years old. And Sarah danced 2 slow dances with him. Mike seriously sulked at her. But by evening he was tired of pretending to be jealous, and they ran away from everyone together to the river, where a group of local fishermen had built a small riverside hut. It turned out surprisingly cozy. They would crash there in the evening with shish kebab and other tasty things, and at dawn they would go fishing. That evening, there was no one there, and the hut sheltered Mike and Sarah until dawn. She thought it was a great omen. It meant they would soon have their own home. They just had to wait a little. She didn't tell Mike about it. She was somehow shy. And then the waiting began, the first month of which seemed endless. And a little later, Sarah found out that they were going to have a child, and she immediately told Mike about it. When the reply to her letter came, Sarah clearly understood that the child would only be hers. Mike explained to her that he hadn't planned any children until he had his own home and money, and she had carelessly let him down, like a child. If Sarah wanted them to stay together, she had to solve the problem. It's nothing terrible. There's still plenty of time to fix everything. Write when you've decided everything. Kisses. Bye. Sarah stopped writing. She hadn't decided anything, although Mike had expressed himself so clearly, and he didn't give any sign of life. 2 months later, her mother died of a rapid, severe illness, and grief for a while overshadowed other problems. Her mother had hidden what was happening to her until the end, considering it unnecessary to scare her daughter in advance, since the doctor's prognoses were unambiguous, unfavorable. The funeral and memorial service passed. Neighbors and friends helped. Sarah lived as if in a fog and didn't even realize that her condition was already noticeable. Uncle Max came, cleared his throat, and asked, "Sarah, do you mind if I'm direct? Does Mikey know?" "He knows. He knows. He doesn't want it. He asked me to solve the problem," Sarah said dryly. "I'll write to that stray puppy," Uncle Max promised. "Don't you worry. I don't doubt that he's the father. It couldn't be anyone else." But Mike answered his father the same thing he had answered her. He hadn't planned anything like this, that he shouldn't be counted on at all, that he could be presented with a fait accompli. And he wasn't going to get married, not until he was 30. He wanted to see the world, especially since life had changed now. There were different opportunities, and he already knew where he would go to work after the army. He had arranged it. So he shouldn't be expected in Kamishin. Sarah felt sorry for Mike's father when he came to show her the letter. He couldn't even utter a word himself and didn't dare to step past the threshold into the house. "Uncle Max, let's not panic in advance. Maybe he'll still change his mind." "It's just from the shock," Sarah began to comfort herself and her would-be father-in-law. "I'll help when the child is born. Don't be shy. Reach out," Uncle Max assured her and quickly went out the door. Sarah truly hoped. It was easier for her that way. And when her son was born, she named him after Mike. Mike still gave no sign of life. Grandpa Max did help in the first years. He bought a stroller, a crib, a snowsuit for his grandson. Sarah received a benefit as a single mother. She couldn't bring herself to demand that Mike acknowledge paternity and pay alimony, as if it were something dirty. Then Uncle Max found a new job and moved beyond the Urals with Teresa. He stayed there. He liked it. Sometimes he sent small sums for Colin's birthday and for New Year's. And then Sarah would give them to Colin in parts as pocket money. But for the last couple of years, less money had been coming from Grandpa. Max had retired and no longer went on expeditions. Does Max know that his son is no longer alive? He's already been told, Sally, Nancy said to her friend. Don't pick at that wound. It's not your business to comfort Max. You've grown distant. Fate has taken you far apart. Forgive me, of course, for being blunt, but your Mike did see the world. And why do people think that if you live only for yourself and your comfort, happiness will immediately come your way? Nothing came, only death. In fact, her friend was right. Her tongue felt heavy, barely moving in her mouth. It was time to go home. Colin was coming for the holidays tomorrow. She had wanted to cook something tasty for him in the evening, but now she would have to do it early in the morning. She woke up when Colin was already home, and the sun was shining brightly through the windows. She jumped out of bed, threw on a robe right over her old pajamas. She felt ashamed in front of her son. She had never met him like this before. She had to explain everything to him. He would understand. He was an adult. "Mom, I already know everything. Calm down." Colin interrupted her rambling story. "You don't have to worry about me. I don't feel anything about this at all. For me, that person was as if he never existed. And you don't need to start drinking over this." "I only yesterday, son. Just that one time, it doesn't mean I—" "Well, nothing. Nothing hurts anymore. That person was once very important to me, so we commemorated him with Nancy. Let's talk about something good instead. You said someone was bringing you a suit and shoes for graduation." "Yes, Danny's mother brings goods from Poland. She promised to find something for the specified amount. I told her not to spend more. I don't want you to get into debt, and I haven't earned anything myself yet." Sarah cracked a couple of eggs into a bowl for a pie with a flourish and sighed. "Well done. That's right. We don't need debts. We have nothing to pay them back with. I can't figure out what I'll wear to your graduation yet." "Mom, can I ask you something?" Colin asked suddenly, abruptly. "Of course," Sarah replied readily. "Just don't scare me. You're too serious." "No, nothing happened. It's just, don't come to the graduation, okay? It's easier for you. You don't have to rack your brain over extra problems." "What? Why?" Sarah was taken aback. "It's such an event. It only happens once, like a wedding. I'll look at you and be proud of how you've grown. You'll leave to study, to work, and I'll remember you as you were on that day." "Mom, you'll see me a million more times without that. There's nothing new or interesting there. Just boring nonsense. The only interesting thing is the disco on the boat, but that's only for graduates, without parents." "You don't understand me, Nicholas," Sarah laughed, not knowing how else to react. "Almost every day is the same for me, so solemn nonsense will do just fine." There was silence for a couple of minutes. Colin hesitated, choosing his words, and finally spoke in the same abrupt, tense voice. "Please don't be offended, but there are other holidays, here, where everyone knows you and no one will judge you by your appearance. You've gotten used to your life and don't notice how poor we are, and that other people see it. I never told you, but after meetings they really discuss parents. Who came in what, who arrived in what. How it infuriates me. You studied here, in the village, where you were all the same, and you just don't understand. No matter how I am myself, I will never gain authority as long as some people call me the son of a homeless woman. I've even gotten into fights over it. Remember how the class teacher complained about my behavior? She was genuinely surprised. Such a student, such grades, and suddenly such behavior. Colin artistically mimicked the class teacher. "I'm not going to explain to her." "Do you think I—" Sarah replied calmly. "Are you ashamed of me? Do you regret that you were unlucky and got such a poor mother? As if you're worse than all other mothers?" "Mom, don't make it complicated. I'm not ashamed of you, but of our poverty. Don't make me out to be a villain. People don't see you. They see your worn-out cheap sandals and penny dresses. There are plenty of such jerks. You can't prove anything to them. I just don't want to see those smirking faces. And why would you? So they can look at you like that." "All right, if you don't want me to, I won't go." Sarah cut him off, starting to furiously whisk the liquid batter. "At least I'll save money. On the trip and everything else." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best. I'll go swing by Andy's. I'll be back before lunch." Colin quickly, awkwardly put an arm around his mother's shoulders and ran off to his friend. Sarah thought it would be better to cry out all her bitterness now, but she continued to quickly, silently whisk the batter, grease the baking sheet, and peel apples for the pie. There were no tears in her eyes, as if something deep inside had dried up. She put the pie in the oven, went out into the hallway, forced herself to look up and meet her reflection in the mirror. Not bad. Not completely lost. Nothing to feel sorry for herself about. Her son was a child not long ago, and she couldn't demand adult behavior from him. And worn-out sandals weren't permanently attached to her feet. New ones would appear. Tomorrow was December 31st. She had to make a good wish at midnight on New Year's Eve. Not just for Colin, but for herself, too, first and foremost. Squinting her eyes questioningly, she repeated, "And for myself, too." "Yes, I really think we should go visit your mother. Yes, I think it's better to get acquainted before going to the registry office, not after. You know what my relationship with my parents is like, and it's time to sort yours out. If you think you've gotten involved with a nagging, bossy woman, you still have time to change your mind and solemnly break off our engagement." Julia was neither a nag nor bossy, but she often managed to fit both a joke and serious matters into the same sentence. It was never boring with her. She took many things in life lightly, but sometimes showed principledness at the most unexpected moments for Nicholas. When it became clear that their relationship was much more than a fleeting romance, she wanted to learn more about her boyfriend. What interested her was precisely what Nicholas was used to avoiding in conversations with girls. The mocking, light-hearted Julia absolutely seriously respected family ties and was very close to her parents. And this did not mean obedience at all. "Why do you never talk about your childhood, about your parents? You didn't grow up in an incubator where software developers and testers are cloned, did you?" Julia asked carelessly, but a testing slyness lurked in her eyes. "Well, you almost guessed," Nicholas chuckled, trying to hide his embarrassment. "I studied at a boarding school, and boarding schools are often called incubators, like orphanages. But they were definitely called that back then. I don't know about now. I'm from a village, Jules." "Wow, what a confession," Julia declared with a smile. "Do you consider that the most terrible fact of your biography? Now you can't get away with it. That skeleton has already fallen out of the closet. And it's beautiful, only in books with soft, bright covers." Julia took his arm and slowed her pace, letting him know she was ready to listen attentively. Since he had finally decided to get married at 30, let his fiancée know him as he really was, not a legend for casual acquaintances. As Nicholas expected, what surprised Julia most was his story about his mother. 15 years without seeing your mother? Are you serious? And money? You're constantly sending her money, aren't you?" "I've been sending it since I started earning more than was needed for the bare necessities for survival. She's refused several times, claims she has enough of her own. But that's because she's not used to allowing herself anything. She's more used to saving on herself. We call each other on holidays, and just because. I've never heard her complain like, 'I miss you, and you never come.' I've invited her to visit me in Moscow so many times. She just can't get herself to come. There are always some stupid reasons. And I'm not ready to spend my vacation visiting the village either." "You just don't see the difference. You're not going to the village, you're going to your mother personally," Julia reminded him. "Oh, let's go together before the wedding. I think your mother and I will get along." "That's exactly what I don't doubt," Nicholas immediately confirmed, although he wasn't sure about anything. He hadn't talked to his mother face-to-face for a long time, always just a few general phrases on the phone. He didn't know himself if his mother was still the way he remembered her, or if she was completely different now. He simply hadn't had time to think about it while he was building his life. "We still have a whole month to get a gift for your mother. What would please her most?" Julia interrupted his unusual thoughts with an unexpected question and completely stumped Nicholas. It seemed the last time he had given his mother something was a very long time ago, from his first salary when he got a job as a night watchman in his first year of university. He remembered her perpetually worn faux leather handbag, which she had touched up twice in the middle of the night shift. He suddenly felt ashamed and sorry. Before going home, he simply bought a new handbag at the mall, not the most expensive one, on sale, but from a normal store, leather. He arrived for the visit with 2 sports bags full of groceries and first pulled out a glossy gift bag from one of them. "Here, this is for you." "Wow! Now I'll be the most fashionable girl in Kamyshin," his mother announced cheerfully, immediately transferring her wallet, a pack of tissues, and a fabric cosmetic bag into the new handbag, slung the bag over her shoulder, and went to the hallway to twirl around. Colin sat at the table, watched her, and thought quite condescendingly how little it took to make his mother happy. But then there was a quiet knock on the front door, and his mother responded in a melodic, girlish voice. "Come in." And in walked a bearded, red-haired man, looking like a Viking from some fantasy movie. He smiled quietly, stopping a couple of steps from the threshold, looked at his mother, and then suddenly noticed Colin sitting at the table. And then his mother, glancing quickly at both of them in turn, said, "Oh, hello, Nathan. Come in, sit down. Meet my son, Nicholas." "Colin, Nathan worked with Grandpa Max on an expedition. He's a surveyor. Remember, I told you about Grandpa's—" "I came to visit my father on vacation and brought a greeting from Grandpa at the same time in the form of homemade honey," Nathan clarified, entering the living room and pointing to the 3-liter jar with dark amber contents that Colin had noticed on the old sideboard as soon as he arrived. "Glad to meet you, Nicholas. My father also has several beehives, just like your grandfather in his new place." He extended his wide, tanned hand to Colin, and Colin silently shook it, simply not wanting to seem like a savage. "You came to visit your father on vacation, so talk to your father." It was almost 20 kilometers to Kolmi, a village on the highway. If he went to the district center, it was easy to figure out that the red-haired surveyor wasn't stopping by Kamyshin on his way, but had taken to visiting their house. The guest wasn't slow-witted. He immediately understood that he was unwelcome. He didn't even sit down, walked back and forth along the window, and said, "Be well, Sarah. I'll be on my way. You and your son surely have a million important things to talk about. See you." "See you?" His mother nodded with a slight smile, and her eyes laughed mysteriously, watching the guest's back. "What is this Nathan doing here?" Colin asked immediately, not hiding his displeasure, as soon as the door quietly closed behind the surveyor. "Does he want a full vacation with affection and hot meals? He should have gone south then. That's a resort program." His mother came over to the table where Colin was sitting and, whether joking or serious, lightly tapped the tabletop with her small, tired fist. "Son, even though you're grown up and brought gifts, choose your words when talking to your mother. If you've noticed, I haven't interfered in your life since graduation, not at all." She still felt it necessary to add, "By the way, Nathan cooks perfectly well himself and doesn't need my watery cabbage soup." Colin couldn't explain why that old conversation suddenly came to mind. He and his mother hadn't guessed then that they wouldn't see each other for many years. While he was visiting his mother that last time, Nathan didn't appear at their house again. And they never mentioned him again. Colin had no idea if she had a personal life, and it hadn't even occurred to him to ask. And now, when she was almost 50, it felt somehow awkward to start being interested. In the photos she sometimes sent him on his phone, his mother looked cheerful and serene. Did she know how to create the appearance of joy? Or was she really doing well? Nicholas had never thought about this either. He was busy with himself, his career, and recently, his personal life. The upcoming trip made him think uncomfortably. He envied Julia. How could she be so happy, as if she were going on a trip to a seaside resort? And the main thing was, anxiety crept into his thoughts. Would Julia look at him differently when she saw the living conditions he had grown up in? For her, rural tourism was an ethnic village somewhere in Greece or Spain, and there the floors and dark hallways didn't collapse because of rotten boards, and there weren't silly bouquets from the 80s hanging on the walls. Sharp-eyed Julia would see all this and understand that if you scratched a successful software developer from an international company hard enough, you'd find a kid in cheap Chinese hand-me-down jackets with a crappy mobile phone, whom the class leaders called the son of a homeless woman. Well, whatever happens, happens. You couldn't run away from yourself forever and not see your mother for so many years. It was despicable. Getting angry at himself always helped him without fail, and 15 minutes later he was calling Julia and telling her that he had bought 2 train tickets. There are no airports nearby. It's too far and inconvenient to travel from a plane. And the train stops at the station in the neighboring village for a whole 2 minutes. If we're lucky, we'll manage to jump out. Practice. You have almost a month. His mother promised to meet them at the train and absolutely refused to take no for an answer. She had probably been stuck in Kamashin and simply wanted to ride the bus back to the station, chat along the way with acquaintances she only met on the road. When Nicholas wrote to her that he was coming to visit with his fiancée, he immediately received a reply message. "Wow, I'm happy. Waiting at Station Square." Julia said, "Now that's what I call something," and boasted about the gifts she had bought for his mother. It turned out she had bought wind chimes for the garden, a tablecloth for the table in the gazebo in the same style, and a set of colored ceramic dishes to match. God knows, Nicholas had no idea if these were suitable gifts for his mother, but he admired them just in case. As for himself, he would give her money, as usual. At Sudakovo Station, Colin was the first to jump onto the dusty, packed earth. Nothing had changed, except perhaps the wooden station building had been repainted from green to light blue, but everything else remained the same. No one had bothered to asphalt the circular area in front of the building. Nothing had grown there for a long time anyway. The station ground was eternally trampled by 100 years of dust. There wasn't a single tree under the windows. And only at the end of the area, near an old Neva, a nimble, dark-haired woman slipped out of it, waved her hand in greeting, and called out loudly, "Colin! Hi!" "That's Mom!" Nicholas tugged at Julia's sleeve, snapping out of his thoughts. "Let's go. She found someone to give us a ride home." They quickly walked towards his mother, and his mother approached them just as quickly. She held one arm with the other, immediately extended her hand to Julia. "Sarah, how was your trip, Julia?" "Thank you. We had a great trip, with nice neighbors in our compartment." "Well, that's great." His mother smiled and, standing on tiptoe, hugged Colin tightly and kissed him on both cheeks. Her eyes shone with genuine joy, and a kind of honeyed, warm scent wafted from her. She pulled back slightly after the greeting to get a good look at her son, and he stared at her in surprise. She didn't look aged or worn out. She was almost the same as he remembered her, and at the same time, somehow different. His mother, who had kept her slim figure in those loose blue jeans, checkered shirt, and cap, could almost be mistaken for his peer. If you didn't look too closely, didn't peer at the network of fine lines on her forehead and at the corners of her eyes. You would never guess she was 50. Her eyes were bold, young, quick. His mother preferred to voice her conclusions aloud. "How respectable you've become. None of our people will recognize you for sure, and if they do, they'll faint. If I hadn't seen your photos and videos, I wouldn't have recognized you as my son right away myself. Julia, at least he's not a pompous bore, is he?" "No, don't worry," Julia laughed. "Then load the luggage into the trunk, son," his mother suggested. "And who's our driver?" Colin asked. "Our driver is me." His mother grinned slyly, noticing his bewildered surprise. "Don't worry about your lives. I'll get you there just fine. The roads are quiet out here. I won't show off any special skills. I drive carefully, like a real hen. But it's safe, gentlemen." Without waiting for an answer, his mother settled behind the wheel. Julia giggled quietly, glancing at Colin, and whispered to him, What you're in for is getting to know your mother all over again. His mother had no intention of keeping the aura of mystery for long, and explained as soon as they got onto the highway. I won't pretend I've become a businesswoman and managed to earn enough for a car. My husband bought it. I didn't even want to learn to drive at all. I was scared, but he persuaded me. At first I trembled, got lost, but then it was fine. I got used to it. Mom, why didn't you even tell me you got married? Nicholas decided to ask, trying to hide his surprise and confusion. Well, forgive me, I'm sorry, Colin. My husband said I should tell you, but I somehow couldn't bring myself to. There wasn't a suitable occasion. It won't affect your life in any way anyway. If you suddenly need the inherited house out in the sticks, that's definitely only your inheritance. I don't have any other children. I thought you'd find out when you came. Besides, you didn't approve of my choice right away. I remember that. What choice? Colin no longer hid his confusion. I married Nathan, his mother explained softly. A long time ago. Remember Nathan, the surveyor who worked with Grandpa Max and visited? Both guests and hosts went to bed only after 3 in the morning, deciding that otherwise they wouldn't get any sleep that day, and the young people were still tired from the train. The night was clear, as if ordered, and they sat for a long time in the garden under the large stars, at the table covered with the new tablecloth, and feasted, and drank a whole samovar of tea while talking. Nathan fell asleep quickly. He had been working until evening after all. And Sarah lay quietly, looking at the thin crescent moon in the window, and remembered that day in all its funny and happy details. Imagine how many years she and her son hadn't really talked. But now that was over, and everything would be different. No, Colin called her every month, asked if everything was okay, how her health was, work, if she needed any more money for anything urgent. Hearing everything's fine, he would say that he was fine too. Sometimes he would report changing jobs or getting a promotion, changing cars and buying an apartment, where he had gone on vacation. She would congratulate him. He would thank her. He invited her to visit, but probably out of politeness, not because he missed her. He had his own life there, in a completely different rhythm and by different rules. Many of his city acquaintances would probably prefer not to be shown a village mother from a village post office, so as not to spoil their impression of himself. Maybe Colin had even invented a different origin story and a different family for himself, to distance himself from where he desperately wanted to get away from. She didn't want to believe that, and Nathan insisted that things weren't so sad. He even grumbled, "How proud and stubborn you are. I would never have thought it when I got involved with you. You should talk to your son frankly. Tell him you miss him, that you're proud of him, how he achieved everything himself despite a difficult childhood. At least tell him about us. Otherwise, it's some ridiculous secret marriage, like in pulp novels. You should have reassured him long ago that you're not counting every penny, that life has gotten better. Otherwise, the boy sends you financial help, and you stash it away, you schemer. Schemers stash it for themselves, and I'm saving it for him, like a personal banker." "Now I'll solemnly hand over the contribution for the wedding trip," Sarah retorted, winking. "Oh, stop being silly. You've raised a normal, capable boy. He's achieved a lot himself and has probably buried his childhood fears long ago. And you still remember that old childhood hurt, how he was ashamed to see you at his graduation. But you were already a grown girl then, and you got offended at a silly little boy." Usually, Sarah listened to Nathan. He was sensible, wouldn't blurt things out rashly. But in her relationship with her son, she couldn't bring herself to change. She even regretted in those moments that she had told Nathan absolutely everything about herself. She wasn't offended at anyone. Life itself had simply convinced her that you shouldn't impose your love on anyone who doesn't show that they need it. That person gets along perfectly fine without it. She hadn't understood this with Mike, Colin's father. She had followed him like a loyal shadow, lived his problems and worries, But he had indeed never discussed a life together or children with her, never promised anything. He only talked about love because all girls liked to hear it, and it was convenient for him to have Sarah around while he lived in his father's house. She had made it all up herself. She only realized this when Colin went away to study and she was left alone. And then it was as if fate brought her together with Nathan. Everything turned out completely differently. Nathan, due to his expeditionary fate, had traveled half the country, but he tried to visit his father in Colmy every year. He didn't think about settling there until retirement. He suspected he would fall into gloomy thoughts and despair completely, as fewer places meant fewer reasons to be sad. He thought maybe his son would change his plans when he decided to get married again. But 10 years had passed since Nathan's first fleeting marriage, and there was no hint of a new attempt. He had even divorced 3 years after the wedding. He went on an expedition to the north, and his wife went to visit her mother and stayed there because she met the owner of a shoe store, and she and her mother decided it was the best option. The husband wasn't offended. He blamed only himself for the failure. He was captivated by bright beauty, didn't pay attention to the fact that they were two different people. Gradually, he got used to the single, nomadic life. He didn't feel deprived, quite the opposite. There were always new people around, new, interesting acquaintances. Once on an expedition, he met a drilling foreman, an older man. They chatted and found out they were fellow countrymen, from the same district, 20 kilometers between their villages. They talked about fishing spots, mutual acquaintances, and in a mood, shared life stories. This countryman, Max, told him about his family, about his runaway wife, about his foolish, selfish son, and about his would-be daughter-in-law with a real grandson. From that evening of exchanging stories, they became friends, despite the age difference. Max retired and, along with his common-law wife, took up amateur beekeeping. And when Nathan was going on vacation to his father in Colmy again, his friend sent a jar of honey with him to his daughter-in-law Sarah, along with a thin envelope. Let it sweeten the girl's life. Sarah met the guest in a friendly manner. After 10 minutes of talking with her, it felt like they had known each other for ages. Nathan subtly glanced around her home. Everything spoke of poverty. Some people described such houses like this: clean, but poor. Many would say the same about the hostess's outfit, but there was no sense of hopeless longing in Sarah's house at all. On the other hand, a feeling of coziness came over you immediately. Nathan was surprised and thought about the new acquaintance all evening. No, the state of the house didn't surprise him at all. He had seen much worse interiors on expeditions, at least 100 times dirtier. It was surprising to see such a beautiful woman living in this setting and not fading. And the next evening, he was back at her house and knocked on the door. "Nathan, come in. Did you forget to give me something?" "Everything's fine. I just thought maybe you need some help with something, like heavy lifting, building or tearing down a shed, for example." "Did Uncle Max ask you? It's cheeky to ask someone to spend their vacation on free labor." Sarah smiled. "No, that's my own cheeky initiative. Think about what you might need." And she suddenly became flustered. Nathan understood. She wasn't used to things being done for her. More often, she did things for others. A spark of distrustful suspicion lit up in her eyes. It wouldn't be easy with her, but he had already decided that the game was worth the candle. Sarah was afraid for a long time to believe that this wasn't a trick or another self-deception. What could this guy possibly need from her? Only a few encounters to spice up his vacation. And that wouldn't be bad for her. Many women really liked such short romances. She was afraid that it wouldn't be so easy and pleasant for her, that she would accidentally get attached to the person, would then foolishly and senselessly miss him and wait for something. And that was exactly what would happen with Nathan. He was too much to her liking. It was better not to disrupt the usual course of life. "You're a coward, Sarah," Nancy taunted her, even scolded her. "I would never have thought before that you were such a coward and had such a negative opinion of yourself. It's obvious to the naked eye that he's a decent man and takes you seriously. Listen to this interesting thing I found out. A forest industry worker who eats lunch at our place all the time goes fishing with your Nathan's father. And they went recently. The father boasted that Nathan was thinking of staying and seriously expanding the apiary, starting a legitimate honey business. He saved up money in the north while living a nomadic gypsy life, and now he's decided to settle down. There. I'm convinced. And what does that have to do with me?" Sarah defended herself. "Don't play dumb! You understand perfectly well," an angry Nancy hissed like a whistling kettle. "Colin didn't like him," Sarah offered her last argument. "Colin isn't the one who has to live with him," Nancy replied even more severely. "I'll tell you honestly, for Colin to understand something, time just needs to pass. He's still young. Let him grow up, get his own bruises first. Then you'll speak the same language again. But now listen to yourself, your intuition. Take a risk, Sally. But this is me telling you." Sarah was no longer able to argue with her. And she had noticed one more thing. The more she resisted change, the more reasons she sought to refuse, the more Nathan gave her reasons to believe him. Nancy was a witness at her and Nathan's modest wedding. Who else would be? "And then you and your husband built up this luxurious apiary together?" Julia asked. "Uh-huh," Sarah chuckled cheerfully. "But that's only in movies where you cry on an icy bus, and in the next shot you're sitting in a Mercedes looking like a magazine beauty. We struggled so much with this apiary idea. We remember it ourselves, laugh, and can't understand why we didn't abandon it. I won't even talk about the bees themselves and the intricacies of dealing with them. You're probably not interested in that. And how many papers you need for legal honey sales. That's where it's dark for beginners. Product tests, veterinary certificate, sanitary passport for the apiary." I was ready to panic, but Nathan is so balanced, no storms could upset him. "We took a very long time to recoup the costs, but now our brand is well known in several districts of the region. It's time to expand our horizons. We have more experience now, it should go easier. I'm sure that with my husband, we'll be able to realize our plans." "You are an unbeatable woman," Julia said, taking advantage of a pause in her future mother-in-law's story. "Now I know for sure where Colin inherited his character from." "Oh, Julia, don't be silly," Sarah laughed. "Colin has already achieved a lot. At his age, I was counting pennies. I couldn't even provide for him properly so he wouldn't feel worse than other children. I would have sat at the post office for peanuts my whole life if I hadn't been so lucky with my husband. So your flattery is unsuccessful. I understand everything about myself." "I wasn't trying to flatter you," Julia objected. "You're wrong to think that character only shows itself in a career. I'm not even 30 yet, and I see so many people who are bitter about the world, disappointed in everything, regardless of age. They live in decent conditions. Their parents did everything so they wouldn't need anything while they were getting an education and starting to work. They don't have children, or don't have to raise them alone. Many of them could hardly have gone through what you did with dignity and not become bitter. I felt uncomfortable when I realized how cruelly Colin had actually treated you. And you met him so warmly. 15 years of only sending your mother some financial payoff instead of attention and formally calling on holidays. So much was on my tongue to say, I just didn't want to spoil your celebration, since you were happy to see him after all. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah interrupted. "Don't, Julia. It's hard enough for him now. I see he's already thought it all over himself. We'll build a real relationship. I'm also not perfect. As you see, I didn't even tell him about my marriage for many years. And I did take the financial payoff, even though I no longer needed it. By the way, before the men from the apiary come back, here, take this envelope for yourself. It will come in handy for the wedding. Refusing your mother-in-law? Let's seal our friendship with a women's secret.